My name is Avery, and I remember the exact moment I made the promise to him. It was early in our relationship when everything felt fresh and new. We were sitting in a small cafe, sunlight pouring in through the windows, the sound of coffee cups clinking in the background. Everything felt perfect, until the words I said next changed everything. "If you ever cheat on me, I will sleep with your best friend," I said, my voice calm, almost casual. I hadn't expected him to react the way he did, but his face froze, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're joking, right?" He laughed nervously, but I could see the unease in his expression. I shook my head, not joking. "No, I'm not. If you cheat on me, I'll sleep with your best friend and it'll be my revenge. You'll feel exactly what I feel." He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His usual relaxed demeanor disappeared as he tried to play it off, giving a half-hearted laugh. "Well, I'm not planning on cheating on you, Avery," he said, clearly uneasy. "You're just being dramatic." I didn't let the tension fade. "If it happens, then that's the price. That's how I'll make you understand how it feels." The words lingered between us, heavy in the air. I could tell it made him nervous, but he didn't argue. He just nodded, avoiding my gaze, and then we moved on as if nothing had happened. But deep down I wasn't joking. I had seen too many red flags. Too many moments when he seemed distant or acted strange when his best friend was around. He would get defensive if I ever asked about their time together, or if I even mentioned feeling a bit too much tension between them. There was something there, something I couldn't put my finger on but couldn't ignore. For months I let it slide. I tried to trust him, tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. But then one night everything changed. I found out what I already suspected. He had been cheating on me the entire time. And just like I promised, I followed through. 9 months into our relationship, everything I had believed in came crashing down. I had suspected it for weeks, maybe even months, but I chose to ignore the signs. Denial, after all, is a powerful thing. But that night, I walked into the apartment we shared and my world tilted. I had been away for a few days, visiting my sister in another state. When I returned, everything seemed oddly quiet. The apartment, usually filled with his music and the buzz of daily life, was silent. The kind of silence that felt heavy. I shrugged it off, assuming he was just caught up in work. But the moment I opened the door to our bedroom, I saw something that made my stomach drop. His phone was lying on the bed, face up. Normally I wouldn't think twice about it, but tonight, everything felt different. I could see a message notification from a name I didn't recognize. My heart skipped a beat. Her name. I didn't even have to open the message to know what it was about. I stood there, frozen for a moment, the weight of the realization hitting me all at once. He had been cheating. The very thing I had feared for months was true. He had betrayed me. I had seen the signs, ignored the gut feeling, but now there was no denying it. I picked up the phone, my hands trembling. I opened the message. "I miss you. Can't wait to see you again soon." It felt like a punch to the gut. There was no more questioning, no more doubts. The truth was staring me in the face and it hurt. Not because I hadn't expected it, but because I had trusted him. And he had broken that trust in the most devastating way possible. For a second I almost felt paralyzed. The silence in the apartment felt suffocating. But then I remembered my promise, the promise I had made at the very beginning. The vow of revenge I had made in the clearest terms. This was exactly what I had warned him about, and now it was time for me to follow through. I put the phone back on the bed, staring at it for a few moments longer, letting the anger build slowly in the pit of my stomach. The betrayal wasn't just painful, it was sickening. I had trusted him, and now he had taken my trust and shattered it. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for answers. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Instead, I took a deep breath and made a decision. It was time to make him feel what he had done. I grabbed my phone, unlocked it, and messaged his best friend, the one I had always known had an underlying tension with me. He had always been the one to joke about how I stole his friend away, how he was always afraid of me being too close to him. But tonight, that fear would become his reality. "Hey, I was wondering if you wanted to hang out tonight?" I typed, sending the message with a sense of calm that almost felt like I was acting in a dream. A few minutes later, his response came through. "Sure, I've got nothing going on. Let's grab a drink." Just like that, I had set the wheels of my revenge into motion. And there was no turning back now. I spent the next few hours in a haze of numbness, the anger and hurt settling into a cold, quiet resolve. My heart was no longer racing with the shock of discovery, it was steady, calculating. I had made my decision and I wasn't going to back down. He had crossed the line first and now it was my turn. I threw on a simple dress, the kind that made me feel confident without being over the top. I didn't need to impress anyone. I just needed to execute the plan. I ran my fingers through my hair, making sure it looked effortless, not too polished. It wasn't about looking good for him. It was about making sure this night was exactly what I had promised. When the doorbell rang, I didn't flinch. I had prepared for this moment. I opened the door and there he was, standing in the hallway with that familiar smirk, like nothing had changed. His eyes flicked over me for a moment, a brief hesitation before he stepped inside. "Ready to grab that drink?" he asked, his voice casual, like we were two friends just hanging out. I smiled, though it felt more like a mask than a genuine expression. "Sure. Let's go." We headed out to the bar, the drive quiet except for the hum of the engine and the occasional streetlight flickering by. I could feel the tension building with every mile, like I was walking towards something inevitable. There was no going back. At the bar, I let the drinks flow freely, the alcohol serving as a background noise to the growing tension. He kept talking, about work, about life, but his words felt distant, almost meaningless. My mind was somewhere else, focusing on the bigger picture. Every word he spoke was like a whisper of something that was about to end. Every laugh he gave, every glance he shot me felt like a part of the act. He was still the same person I had known, the one who had always been too quick to crack jokes and act casual about everything. But tonight, everything was different. After a few more drinks, he was looser, more comfortable. That's when I made my move. I told him I wanted to go back to my place, just to hang out, nothing too serious. The lines between us had always been blurred, but tonight I made sure to cross them. We got back to my apartment, and the moment we walked inside, everything shifted. The tension that had been hanging between us snapped, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely in control. He didn't hesitate when I kissed him. It was quick, urgent, and for a moment I felt a rush of power surge through me. This was happening. This was my revenge, my promise being fulfilled. The betrayal was now reciprocated. I had taken his best friend and made him feel the betrayal that he had made me endure. In that moment, it didn't matter how much I had once cared for him. It didn't matter that we had shared so many laughs, so many memories together. He had broken me, and this was how I was going to fix it. The night unfolded without hesitation. There was no regret, no pause. We were two people, both playing roles in a game of our own making. His hands were all over me, and I let him believe he was still in control. I wanted him to think this was just another night, another mistake he would brush off. But he wouldn't. When it was over, I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, letting the full weight of the night settle over me. It wasn't the victory I had expected. There was no rush of satisfaction, no rush of triumph. Instead, there was just emptiness. I had taken what he loved most, and in doing so, I had destroyed the trust they had built over years of friendship. But as I lay there, I realized that even though I had taken revenge, something inside me had shifted. The satisfaction of making him pay wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. As I dressed, I didn't feel any sense of relief. I just felt drained. It was over. And now it was time to face the consequences. The days after that night blurred into a haze of uncertainty. I didn't expect to feel empty, but I did. The satisfaction I thought I would get from executing my plan never came. Instead, all I felt was a quiet heaviness that settled in my chest. I had done exactly what I said I would do, and yet it didn't feel like justice. It didn't feel like a victory. The morning after, I couldn't look at him the same way. When I woke up, he was still there, lying next to me, unaware of the storm brewing in my mind. The night had felt like a betrayal, but now I realized it wasn't just his actions that I was punishing. It was the lie I had lived for so long. The lie that I could fix everything by taking revenge, that somehow this would make it all better. I got out of bed quietly, leaving him there as I moved through the motions. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been broken beyond repair, but it wasn't just between us. It was within me too. I tried to brush off the feeling, but it lingered. He would wake up and he wouldn't know what had happened, not yet. The guilt began to creep in, subtle at first. I hadn't thought about the consequences of my actions. It had been payback, sure, but it was more than that. I had destroyed something important, something that didn't just belong to him but to both of us. As the day dragged on, I could hear him moving around the apartment, still unaware of what I had done. I wasn't ready to face him, not yet. I needed time to process. But even as I stayed silent, I could already feel the distance between us growing. It was no longer just about what had happened the night before, it was about the future. A future that was no longer clear, no longer simple. A few hours later, I saw him standing in the doorway, looking at me with confusion in his eyes. He must have sensed that something was off. The guilt hit me again, stronger this time. "Avery, what's going on? You've been acting distant all morning," he said, his voice laced with concern. I didn't respond right away. How could I? How could I look him in the eye after everything? After what I had done, there was no pretending. No turning back. I need to talk to you, I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. He frowned, walking closer to me. About what? It felt like a lifetime ago that I had made my promise, but now, standing in front of him, I realized the weight of my words. The words that I had so confidently spoken without considering the consequences. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to face the reality of my actions. I know what you've been doing, I said softly, my eyes avoiding his. I found out about the cheating. And I followed through with my threat. I slept with your best friend. His face went pale. He didn't respond right away, and I could see the shock in his eyes. The disbelief. But I didn't wait for him to speak. I couldn't. I've been angry. I wanted revenge. But now that it's done, I don't feel anything, I continued, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and regret. I just feel broken. He stood there for a moment, unable to process my words. The silence between us felt suffocating. It was the kind of silence that echoed with the weight of all the things left unsaid. I never thought it would be like this, I said quietly, my gaze still avoiding his. I thought this would fix it, that it would make me feel better. But it didn't. He stepped forward, reaching out for my hand, but I pulled away before he could touch me. I didn't want him to touch me. I didn't want to feel his comfort, his pity. I'm sorry, he whispered. I never meant for this to happen. But I didn't want his apologies. I didn't want his remorse. He had already shown me how little he cared about me with his actions. And now I had done the same to him. We were both equally guilty. I stood there for a moment longer, trying to absorb the enormity of the situation. This wasn't the revenge I had imagined. It wasn't the revenge I had wanted. I had ruined his relationship with his best friend. I had destroyed what little trust we had left. And in the end, I was left with nothing but the consequences of my choices. I think we're done, I said finally, my voice steady, though my heart felt anything but. This isn't going to work. He didn't argue, didn't try to stop me. He just nodded, his eyes filled with something that looked like both sorrow and regret. It was over. The days after that conversation felt like an endless cycle of emotional exhaustion. I couldn't escape the weight of what I had done, even as I tried to carry on with my daily routine. It wasn't just the relationship I had destroyed, it was the friendship too. I had shattered something that had been built over years, something that no amount of apology or regret could repair. I knew what was coming. I had made my decision to take revenge, to show him the consequences of his actions. But the reality of it all felt hollow. I had taken everything from him, his trust, his friendship, his dignity. In doing so, I had destroyed not only my own world but also the world he had built with his best friend. The hardest part? Watching them fall apart. I kept my distance from him after that conversation. It wasn't about anger anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about the realization that there was nothing left between us. Every time I saw him, I saw the damage, the broken trust in his eyes. He wasn't the same person. He wasn't the man I had fallen for. But what really haunted me was seeing his best friend. The man who had been by his side for years. I knew what I had done to their friendship. I saw the hurt in his eyes the same way I had seen it in mine. I had torn something apart that was never mine to destroy. It wasn't just about our betrayal anymore. It was about how their brotherhood had been ripped apart in a single moment. I couldn't avoid him forever. It was a few days later when I saw him again, his best friend. We ran into each other at the store of all places. It was awkward at first. I had never imagined a situation where we would both be in the same space again. But here we were, facing each other in the cereal aisle like it was some cruel twist of fate. He was staring at me, his eyes searching for some kind of explanation that I didn't have. He didn't say anything at first. I could tell he was struggling with his own emotions, torn between anger and confusion. Why? He finally asked, his voice low but edged with pain. Why would you do this? I didn't have an answer. How could I explain the decisions I had made when I didn't even understand them myself? Revenge. It was supposed to be something satisfying, something that would make me feel better. But all it had done was hurt everyone involved. I don't know, I said, shaking my head. I thought it would make me feel better. I thought it would give me closure. He looked at me for a long time like he was trying to make sense of it all. And then, with a final resigned sigh, he turned to walk away. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say anything else. He just left. That moment lingered with me long after. The weight of his hurt, the look in his eyes, was more than I could bear. I had expected him to be angry, to yell, but what I hadn't prepared for was the emptiness, the absolute void of their friendship, the one I had now made irreparable. A few days later, I received a text from him. It was simple, but it sent a chill down my spine. "We haven't talked since. And I don't think we will. Not after what you did. I've lost my best friend. And I've lost any respect I had for you." I didn't know what to say. How could I apologize for something that had already been done? How could I fix something that was already broken beyond repair? The text felt like a final nail in the coffin, a confirmation that my actions had consequences far beyond what I had expected. Not only had I destroyed the trust in my relationship, but I had destroyed something far more valuable, something I couldn't undo. I didn't respond. What was there to say? My promise had been carried out, but it had destroyed more than I had ever imagined. I had taken away something that wasn't mine to take, and in return, I had lost more than I had ever expected to. The phone buzzed again, but I didn't look at it. Instead, I sat there in silence, letting the truth of it all wash over me. There was no turning back now. The aftermath of my revenge had become more than I could handle. It wasn't the closure I had wanted. It wasn't the satisfaction I had imagined. It was just loss. The weeks that followed felt like they were stretching on forever. Time moved, but nothing really changed. I couldn't escape the feeling of what I had done. I had spent so much time convincing myself that revenge would be the answer, but now that it was over, there was nothing but emptiness. The anger I had once felt, the desire to get back at him, had been replaced with an overwhelming sense of loss. I tried to keep myself busy, work, meeting friends, filling my time with distractions, but no matter where I went, the truth followed me like a shadow. It wasn't just the guilt of what I had done to him, it was the fact that I had taken something far more valuable than just his trust. I had destroyed their friendship. A bond that had been formed over years through laughter, hardship, and life's ups and downs, was gone in a single night. I had underestimated the ripple effect of my actions. I had been so focused on getting my revenge, on showing him how it felt to be betrayed, that I hadn't considered how deeply it would affect everyone around us. I ran into his best friend again a few weeks later, though this time, it wasn't a chance encounter at the store. It was more deliberate. I had heard through mutual friends that he was struggling, and I knew I had to face him again. He hadn't reached out since that text, and I hadn't expected him to. But I knew that we needed closure, both of us. When I saw him, he didn't look angry anymore. There was no frustration in his eyes, no rage. He just looked tired. It was as if the weight of everything that had happened had taken its toll on him. "You okay?" I asked, my voice soft, unsure of how to start the conversation. I wasn't even sure what I was expecting him to say. Part of me was still holding out hope for an apology, but I knew I didn't deserve that. He took a deep breath and shook his head slowly. "No, Avery. I'm not okay. But I'm starting to come to terms with it." There was a long silence between us. The world around us seemed to fade away as we both stood there, knowing that there was no easy way to fix what had been broken. The guilt that had been eating at me for weeks began to swallow me whole again. I had done something unforgivable. And now, I had to live with the consequences. "I'm sorry," I said finally, unable to find the right words. "I never should have done what I did." He looked at me then, his expression unreadable, before letting out a sigh. "You think saying sorry is going to fix it? You think it's that easy?" I flinched at his words. He was right, of course. Sorry wasn't going to fix anything. It wasn't going to undo the damage I had caused. There was no taking back what I had done. "I don't know what I thought would happen," I whispered. "But I didn't think it would end like this." He shook his head, taking a step back. "No, I don't think you did. But you can't change it now, Avery. You've already ruined everything. You've ruined him. You've ruined us. There's nothing left here." And just like that, I realized the truth. There was nothing left. There would be no fixing this. No reconciling what had been broken. "I'm sorry," I repeated, even though it felt hollow now. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But I did. And now, I have to live with that. He nodded once, slowly, as though accepting the reality. We all have to live with our choices. And with that, he turned and walked away. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself drowning in a sea of reflection. Every small decision I made, every interaction with others, felt like an echo of what had happened. I tried to fill the silence with work, with distractions, but no matter how hard I tried, the weight of my actions was always there. I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't bury it deep enough to forget. I spent a lot of time by myself during this period. The once busy apartment felt like a lonely cage, the walls closing in on me as the truth weighed heavier each day. I had chosen my path. I had executed the revenge I promised, but I hadn't anticipated the emotional toll it would take. It wasn't just the betrayal I had exacted on him that haunted me, It was the emptiness that followed. I didn't sleep well. I couldn't eat properly. Everything felt like it was out of sync with the world. The clarity I had hoped for when I made that promise, the sense of victory I had imagined in the aftermath, never materialized. All I felt was a strange emptiness. I couldn't shake the feeling that in my effort to hurt him, to show him how much he had hurt me, I had only made things worse, for everyone involved. The guilt was gnawing at me, pulling me in directions I didn't want to go. I hadn't just destroyed his life. I had destroyed a piece of my own soul in the process. In those late nights, when I was alone with my thoughts, I asked myself the question over and over again. Was it worth it? Did the pain I inflicted on him, the destruction I caused between him and his best friend, give me any satisfaction? Was this the price I was willing to pay to prove my point? The answer was always the same: no. I had broken a relationship. No, I had broken 2 relationships. One with him and the other with myself. In one of these dark nights of reflection, I received a message from him. It wasn't a long one, just a simple text. "I'm moving on, Avery. I hope you can too." I stared at the words, unable to respond. I didn't know how to answer. How could I explain the regret that was slowly consuming me? How could I tell him that the revenge I had thought would make everything better had only destroyed me even further? I didn't reply. I couldn't. The damage was done. We were both broken. And nothing could fix that. I spent the next few days in a haze of regret, uncertainty, and self-loathing. I kept thinking about what I had lost, what I had ruined. There was no undoing what had been done. There was no way to fix the hurt, the betrayal, and the broken trust that now existed between us. I had been so sure of myself in the beginning, so confident that my plan for revenge would work. But now, all I had left was the truth that it hadn't brought me peace. It hadn't fixed anything. It had only made things worse. As I sat on my couch that evening, staring at the empty space where his things used to be, I realized something. The revenge I had once sought so eagerly wasn't the answer. It wasn't the way to heal the pain. It wasn't the way to find closure. It was just a way to perpetuate the cycle of hurt. And now, I had to find a way out of it. I had to find a way to move forward. The days after his message blurred into one long stretch of emotional fog. I had convinced myself that moving on would be easy. That somehow, once the dust settled and the initial rush of revenge faded, I would feel like everything had been put back into place. But the truth was that I was more lost than ever. The one thing I had never truly accounted for in my plan for revenge was the cost. Not just the cost to him, not just the betrayal I had orchestrated, but the cost to myself. I had given so much of myself away in the pursuit of a fleeting sense of justice that now, I was left with nothing. I remember one evening sitting on my balcony looking out over the city. The lights twinkled in the distance and everything seemed so distant. Everything felt so empty. It was a clear night, but the sky felt clouded. My thoughts weighed heavy on me and I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. I had destroyed something in myself. It wasn't just the relationship with him. It wasn't just the friendship with his best friend. It was the person I had been before all of this. I wasn't the same. I had changed. And not in a way I could be proud of. A knock at my door broke my thoughts and I looked up in surprise. It was late, too late for casual visitors. I stood up slowly and made my way to the door, my heart pounding in my chest. When I opened it, I wasn't expecting him. The man whose life I had torn apart, the man I had once been so sure I'd never have to face again. But here he was standing in the doorway looking lost. Broken. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly, his voice low, almost defeated. I hesitated. I had thought this moment would be filled with anger, accusations, or perhaps the satisfaction of having finally put him in his place. But instead there was only silence. And in that silence I saw the true cost of what I had done. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. We sat down across from each other in the same space where we'd once laughed, once shared intimate moments that felt so real, so effortless. Now it felt like an alien place. The tension in the room was thick, and neither of us knew where to start. Finally he spoke. "You really hurt me, Avery. You really hurt me, and I don't think I can forgive you for that." His words stung, but they were true. I had hurt him. I had taken away his trust, his dignity, and his friendship. But what hurt the most was that he was right. I didn't expect forgiveness. I didn't think I deserved it. "I know," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I never should have done it. I thought it would make me feel better. I thought it would give me control. But I was wrong." He didn't say anything for a long moment. We sat there in silence, the weight of the past few months settling over us. Finally he looked at me. His eyes were tired, worn out, and I could see the pain I had caused reflected in them. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you," he said softly. but what's done is done. We can't change what happened. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. What could I say? What was there left to say? The damage had been done. And then he stood up. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. With us. But I think we need to let it go. For both of us. The finality in his voice hit me harder than anything else. There was no more anger, no more vengeance. There was only the cold, undeniable truth. The damage was irreversible. We couldn't go back. I think you're right, I said quietly. I think it's time to move on. As he left, there was no grand farewell. No tearful apologies. Just the sound of the door closing behind him, leaving me with nothing but the quiet aftermath of my decisions. The silence that followed his departure echoed through the apartment like an oppressive weight. For the first time since the night of my revenge, I felt utterly alone, and the feeling was suffocating. I had gone through the motions of anger, of vengeance, of cold satisfaction, but now all of it felt like a distant, hollow memory. I walked through the apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last. The place that once felt like home now seemed foreign, like a place where a different version of myself had lived. I hadn't just lost him, I had lost everything I thought I knew about myself. In the weeks that followed, I did what I had to do. I put on a brave face, pretending to move on, pretending to be fine. But deep inside, I was unraveling. Every time I saw a message from someone, his friends, mutual acquaintances, my stomach churned. They knew what had happened. They knew what I had done. And they all had their opinions. I couldn't escape the reality that the friendship I had torn apart wasn't the only thing I had broken. I had shattered my own sense of self-respect in the process. The retribution I had sought wasn't bringing me peace. It was only feeding the guilt that was now consuming me from the inside out. There was one night when I found myself staring at the ceiling in the dark, the weight of my choices settling on me once again. I had lost myself in that moment of revenge, believing that it would give me some kind of power, some kind of control. But now, all it had done was leave me more lost than ever before. I had crossed a line and there was no going back. I couldn't fix what I had done, couldn't undo the damage I had caused. And no amount of apology or explanation could change the fact that I had hurt people. Real people, people I had once cared about. The hardest part of this realization was that the person I had hurt the most wasn't him. Was me. I had believed that my actions were justified, that taking revenge would give me closure, but in the end, it only left me feeling more empty and more broken than I ever thought possible. A few days later, I found myself sitting at a cafe sipping my coffee, and I ran into one of my old friends, someone I hadn't seen in months. She sat down across from me, her eyes scanning me curiously. "Hey Avery," she said, her voice tentative. "How have you been?" I looked at her, not sure how to answer. How do you explain the destruction of your own emotional world to someone who isn't involved in the chaos? How do you explain that you've made a choice so big, so damaging, that it has left you unrecognizable to yourself? "I've been better," I said, my voice small, my gaze shifting to the window. She didn't press me for details. Instead, she just nodded and smiled softly. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here for you." That simple gesture felt like a small thread of hope. Maybe I hadn't completely lost everything. Maybe there was still a chance to rebuild, to find a way to piece together the fragments of myself that had been scattered along the way. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But I had to start somewhere. I had to start with forgiving myself, something that seemed impossible at the moment but was necessary for any kind of healing to begin. The next day, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I picked up the phone and called my mom. It was a call I had been avoiding, a call I wasn't sure I was ready to make. But I knew that if I was ever going to move forward, I had to start facing the consequences, no matter how painful they might be. "Hi, Mom," I said when she picked up. My voice trembled, but I didn't hang up. I had to speak my truth. "I need to talk to you about something." There was a long pause on the other end before she finally spoke. "Of course, honey. What's going on?" And so I began to tell her. I didn't go into every detail, but I didn't hide from the truth. I told her about the betrayal, about my actions, about how I thought I was justified in seeking revenge. And I told her how empty I felt now, how I had never expected the consequences to be so deep. I thought she might be angry. I thought she might lecture me, but instead she just listened. When I finished, there was another long pause. Then she finally said, "Avery, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to listen and support you no matter what." Those words, simple as they were, felt like a bomb on a wound I hadn't even realized was still so raw. She wasn't angry. She didn't need to be. She just wanted to be there for me. And that was enough. That conversation didn't fix everything. But it was a start. It was a reminder that healing takes time, and sometimes it starts with the hardest thing: facing the truth. As time passed, I found myself in a constant state of reflection, weighing the truth of my actions against the person I had become. It was harder than I thought it would be to undo the emotional damage I had inflicted on myself and others. But slowly, very slowly, I began to realize that forgiveness wasn't just something I needed to ask for from others, it was something I had to offer myself. The path to forgiveness wasn't easy. Some days it felt impossible. But I had to start somewhere. I began by cutting out the distractions. I stopped checking his social media, stopped asking friends for updates about him. It wasn't healthy and it wasn't helping me heal. I needed to focus on my own growth, on reclaiming the life I had almost lost in the pursuit of revenge. I started going to therapy, something I had been avoiding for months. I thought I could handle everything on my own, that I could somehow fix it without any external help. But the truth was that I couldn't do it alone. I had to face the emotions I had buried deep within me, the guilt, the shame, the anger, and the fear. At first, it was uncomfortable. I would sit in that therapist's office, trying to find the words to explain the chaos I felt inside, only to realize how deep the pain ran. But with every session I felt a little lighter. I began to understand that the revenge I had taken wasn't a reflection of strength, it was a sign of weakness, a desperate attempt to gain control in a world that felt out of control. One afternoon I sat in my therapist's office, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. "It wasn't supposed to feel like this," I said, my voice breaking. "I thought I would feel powerful. I thought I would feel better. But all I feel is empty." She nodded, listening carefully. "Avery, revenge never heals anything. It never brings closure. It only leaves more brokenness in its wake. What you're feeling now is the weight of that truth. But it doesn't have to define you forever." Her words struck me like a lightning bolt. The weight of them sunk deep into my chest, and for the first time I felt it, the emptiness I had been trying to avoid. But this time I didn't try to run from it. I sat with it and I let it wash over me. I had made a mistake, a big one. But the mistake didn't have to define the rest of my life. I could still make choices that would help me heal. I could rebuild. I started small. I began focusing on things that made me feel good, things that weren't tied to revenge or to the people I had hurt. I joined a book club to connect with others, something I had always wanted to do but never made time for. I started volunteering at a local charity, using my time to help others and remind myself that there was more to life than the pain I had caused. As I put my energy into these small acts, I began to feel a shift. It wasn't dramatic or instant, but it was real. I started to feel like myself again. I began to forgive myself little by little. And, in the process, I began to see the world differently. I still struggled, of course. Some days, the guilt would come crashing back, and I'd have to remind myself that healing wasn't a straight line. It was messy. It was hard. But every day, I chose to be better than the person I had been. Every day, I chose to take responsibility for my actions, and every day I chose to move forward. One afternoon, months later, I found myself walking through the park, the sunlight filtering through the trees, a soft breeze in the air. I took a deep breath and realized that I was no longer holding my breath. For the first time in a long while, I felt at peace. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I wasn't waiting for the world to make things right. I had learned that the only person I could truly control was myself. The mistakes I had made, the pain I had caused were part of me, but they didn't define me. I had learned to forgive myself. And that was the first step toward true healing. It had been almost a year since everything had fallen apart. A year since I had followed through on that promise. A year since the consequences of my actions began to unfold in ways I never imagined. The guilt, the shame, the empty feeling, it all still lingered in the background, but I had learned how to live with it. The hardest part of the process wasn't facing the damage I had done to him or his best friend. It was facing the damage I had done to myself. But now I was starting to realize something crucial. Redemption wasn't about undoing the past. It wasn't about fixing everything that had gone wrong. It was about moving forward, about making amends where I could, and about finding a new sense of purpose in a life that had once seemed lost. I had worked hard on myself these past months. Therapy, journaling, volunteering, it had all been part of my healing process. But now I felt a pull toward something bigger, something beyond just repairing the damage. I needed to find a way to take what I had learned and use it for something meaningful. One evening, I sat down with my best friend, Emily, at a cafe we frequented back in college. I hadn't seen her much since everything had gone down, and honestly, I had been avoiding everyone. But I needed to talk to someone who would listen without judgment, someone who wouldn't let me hide from the truth. "So, how have you really been?" Emily asked, her tone gentle but direct. She could always tell when I was hiding something. I took a deep breath, the familiar weight settling in my chest. I've been okay. Better but not perfect. I'm still figuring things out. Still trying to understand everything that happened. She nodded, not rushing me to speak more. Emily knew me well enough to give me space, but her presence was always a grounding force. I've been thinking a lot, I said, my voice steady but uncertain. About what happened. About how I messed up so badly. And how I can make it right even if I can't undo the damage. I can't keep living in the past, I know that. But I need to find something to do with everything I've learned. She gave me a soft smile, her eyes warm with understanding. I've been waiting for you to say that. I paused, looking at her in confusion. What do you mean? You've been so focused on paying for what you did, Avery, she said, her words thoughtful. But maybe it's time for you to take what you've gone through and turn it into something meaningful. You can still make a difference. You just have to decide to use your experience to help others, to do something that aligns with who you are now, not who you were. Her words hit me like a flash of clarity. I had been running from my past, from the pain, the guilt, and the mistakes I'd made. But what if I could take all of that and use it to help someone else? What if I could use my pain, my story, to inspire others to avoid the same mistakes I had made? Over the next few months, I began to explore options. I started researching different organizations that focused on relationship counseling, therapy for emotional healing, and support for people who had been through similar experiences. I found a few programs that resonated with me and I reached out. It wasn't an easy process and I had to confront a lot of uncomfortable truths along the way. But with each step, I felt like I was getting closer to something important. Something that could give my past meaning. One day, I received an email from a local nonprofit that worked with people recovering from toxic relationships. They had a volunteer program where people with personal experience could help others through the healing process. It was exactly what I needed. I reached out and soon I was on my way to becoming a peer counselor. I didn't have all the answers and I didn't pretend to. But I had lived through the pain and I had found a way to survive it. I could share that. I could guide others through their healing, showing them that they didn't have to make the same mistakes I did. It's strange how life can change in ways you don't expect. Looking back, I can hardly recognize the person I was before. The girl who sought revenge, the girl who thought that hurting others would somehow heal the pain inside. That version of me seems like a distant memory now, as if she existed in another lifetime. I had changed, and not because I wanted to, I had changed because I needed to. I had spent months working with a nonprofit, talking to people who were lost in their own pain, people who had made the same mistakes I had, people who had tried to numb their hurt with unhealthy coping mechanisms. I had been that person. I knew what it felt like to need something, anything to make the hurt go away. But I also knew what it was like to find healing through self-reflection and self-forgiveness. I had the opportunity to talk to these people, to share my own experiences, to let them know they weren't alone. There were days when I felt completely out of my depth. But then there were days when I saw someone finally understand something I had said, when they found clarity in the words I shared. Those moments were powerful. They made me realize that my pain, my mistakes, could be used to create something positive. The first time I stood in front of a group of people at one of the group therapy sessions, I felt that familiar rush of fear. Would I be able to help them? Would my words matter? But as I spoke, I realized that I wasn't speaking to them from a place of anger, revenge, or hurt anymore. I was speaking from a place of truth and understanding. I wasn't here to be their savior. I was here to help them find their own path toward healing, just as I had done. As the months passed, I felt the weight of my past slowly lifting. It wasn't perfect and I wasn't whole yet. But I was moving forward and that was enough. I had taken the broken pieces of myself and found a way to piece them together. And in the process I had found something I never thought I would, a sense of peace. One afternoon, I sat in the park after a long session with a client, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The city around me buzzed with life, but in that moment, it felt like everything had come to a standstill. I wasn't running from my past anymore. I wasn't ashamed of it. I had learned to accept it, to own it, and to use it for something greater than myself. The text I had received from him months ago, the one where he said, "I'm moving on, Avery. I hope you can too," played in my mind. And for the first time I truly understood it. He had moved on. And so had I. There was no more need for revenge. No more need for closure. I had found my own peace, and that was worth far more than any revenge or apology ever could be. I took out my phone and texted Emily. I had shared every step of this journey with her, and I wanted her to know how much her support had meant. I'm proud of how far I've come. Thank you for always being there. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with her reply. You did the hard work, Avery. I'm just glad I could be there to watch you grow. I smiled and leaned back on the park bench, feeling the breeze brush against my face. This was my new chapter. I had turned the page and I was no longer chasing after the past. I was embracing the future, a future that was finally mine to define.